I know that you guys, if you watch my interview with Apex Crypto Consulting, he definitely talks about what the International Monetary Fund could be doing with XRP, and essentially what it has to do with is the ESDR from the International Monetary Fund. I talked a little bit about it with Crypto Vice, but I'm really looking more and more into this. So this is essentially what we're declaring here. Once the Clarity Act is approved, Ripple must hold under 20% of the XRP supply in order to avoid being a security. So we could quickly just fact check this. But it is true. It's not just XRP, but it's in general 20% of the supply. So this is the impact on the Clarity Act. All right. If the Clarity Act is improved, 20% limit is going to define whether a digital asset is a commodity or security under the new SEC. So to meet the standard, Ripple might need to divest, defer, transfer, or manage its escrow holdings differently, such as transporting a portion to the U.S. government. This is what Google is saying. Now, we know from a federal judge that XRP in and of itself is not a security. But to seek the end of the SEC CFTC jurisdictional dispute, they would have to do that in order for them to, I guess, cement XRP status as a non-security. We know that it is in and of itself not a security. They're evidently fighting to go against the idea of it essentially being a security. But this is essentially what we really need to be focusing on, is this 20% limit. As it currently stands in the Genius Act, the way that the Clarity Act, the way that they wrote it, 20% limit in order for something to not be classified as a security. Now, Ripple already holds about 40% of the current supply. So what are they going to do with the other remaining 20%? That's 20 billion coins. The XRP that Ripple has locked up is going to be sold to BlackRock or USA. I don't know. I don't know about that. I want to jump into what Grok is saying, because they're talking about an electronic special drawing rights. And he's saying by seceding part of it to the U.S. government, it complies and allows the International Monetary Fund to step in for XRP's price, since the International Monetary Fund can only adopt assets that are adopted by nations. I want to say that Brad Garlinghouse sat down. I want to say that he sat down with the interview. Here it is right here, right? The clip shows Brad Garlinghouse asking, do you see the IMF holding crypto assets in the future? And he was basically kind of giving him a hard time, right? Do you see holding it in the future? And they basically responded with, the IMF has legal restrictions, but there's no new developments here. Essentially what he said in the video is that the country would have to first develop it. I wonder if I could find this video. Pay attention to the body language. It's almost as if Brad and him had a conversation in closed-door meetings, and Brad is kind of thrown off guard, as if they had this conversation right before they walked out, and he goes, I did not write this. And pay attention to the International Monetary Fund's body language. Brad is kind of sitting there saying, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? And he's sitting there, he's saying, I'm from the legal department. I have to take a conservative approach to it. Just pay attention to the body language, because I'm going to tie this into why the International Monetary Fund could potentially hold on to the digital asset.
Can you see those? There's 2 votes.
Let me try.
Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? Oh,
Look at his body language.
That's easier. You want to take one? Go for it. The first one's for you. IMF. Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? I did not put that up there.
Remember, I'm from the legal department. I'm supposed to be very conservative about these things. I don't want to go into great details about
Maybe I should take what the IMF is going to do. I think we
look,
stunned Ross into silence with that one.
For that to happen, okay, under the current legal framework, some country would have to use a crypto asset as its currency.
And that's the key right there, is in order for the International Monetary Fund to hold these digital assets, some government around the world would have to hold this asset. So that's the confirmation here, right? By ceding part to the U.S. government, it complies and allows the International Monetary Fund to set XRP's price, since the IMF can only adopt assets first adopted by nations. So once the Clarity Act kind of implements this 20% rule, Ripple can only hold on to 20 billion tokens. What happens to the other 36, 40% that they're holding on to? What's up, Caveman? Guys, please give Caveman a follow. What up? What up, Hun Singer? So, yes, under the current frameworks. Well, we have to see once it's written into stone. You're right. So what I'm kind of interested on, you know what? I don't necessarily want to dive too deep into the price. Can you guys even? There you go. I don't want to dive too deep into the price. What I essentially want to talk about is maybe the implementations of what happens if the International Monetary Fund does adopt this asset, and XRP could become the new special drawing rights. So I think in order for us to kind of get the best grip on this, maybe I should give you guys a little bit of a refresher on the special drawing rights. The special drawing rights is like an international emergency savings account. This was created by the International Monetary Fund to help countries when they need extra money reserves quickly. Liquidity. This was something that they had introduced in 1969, but it failed, okay? And they're saying that it's an international reserve asset, okay? Think of it as a special credit voucher that allows countries to hold part of their official savings, right? Things that they're already holding now, the dollars, the euro, whatever that case may be. The International Monetary Fund, because the world ran into a short of safe money for global trade and payments. There was a lack of liquidity, okay? The SDR is not tied to one currency, but it's a basket of them, right? And it depends on where the country is actually trying to tap into the liquidity. If it's Japan, they're going to tap into the yen. If it's British, they're going to tap into the pound. And the IMF calculates the exact value every day based on the current rates of these exchanges, okay? But as of right now, there are no cryptocurrencies that are included into the basket. Of course there's not. And I'm not even saying that this would be something that would be included into the basket, but we're essentially just trying to see if we can find the breadcrumbs to see if the XRP can actually come in and connect it in order to see if it could become that extra reserve money, that liquidity. If it can actually provide liquidity, and if that is the case, then maybe it does become a reserve asset, right, for that global liquidity. So now that you guys have a firm understanding of what the special drawing rights was, this was not something that actually did get implemented because it had failed back in the 1969. But now there is this new technology that it has abundant liquidity that's probably able to supply global liquidity from when they do need to tap into it. So let's dive a little bit deeper. Once the Clarity Act is approved, Ripple must hold 20% of the XRP supply to avoid being a security. That's how it's currently written in the Genius Act. By ceding part to the U.S. government, which maybe they do, it complies and allows the International Monetary Fund to set the price of XRP, since the IMF can adopt assets first by the nations. Guys, when you hear about this, your focus should not go to the price, right? Setting the price of the asset. That is something. The price will come after this, after the International Monetary Fund obtains and holds on to these assets. If the International Monetary Fund does obtain these assets and they are utilizing it as a if they are utilizing that as a reserve currency or a liquidity provider, then the price will come, okay? But we're not reading this looking to have these high expectations of the International Monetary Fund setting the price. I don't want that to be about it, because that's where of course, all of this is speculation, right? There's dominoes that need to play in order for the International Monetary Fund to actually implement a new ESDR, okay? I don't want to dive too deep onto the set price, them setting up the price. I want to follow the sequence, the order of sequence, and see what needs to happen in order for this to happen. And if this happens, then what else is going to happen? All right? So the Clarity Act and the 20% supply threshold. So it distinguishes between the securities and the SEC. Essentially, if it's going to be, these digital assets have to be categorized. If they're going to come in and they're going to look at an asset and they're going to study them on an individual base cases, they're going to look at them and they say, this one's a security, the SEC has jurisdiction over it. This one is a commodity, the CFTC is going to go over it. Me personally, I think there's going to be assets that don't fit plainly into the box of a security and a commodity. They just don't. There's certain there's certain properties of a commodity that I think applies to certain assets, but then certain commodities I don't believe apply to the same asset as well, right? Some of them do act like securities, and some of them do act like commodities all together in the same thing. Is Ripple setting itself up for a partnership to place its extra inventory? Well, that's essentially what we're kind of discussing tonight. I wouldn't say partnership, but maybe just maybe that's kind of the road that they're taking, is because in order for them to abide by the current regulations that are probably going to get implemented, I'm sure that this 20% threshold is going to be popped through. If that is the case, then Ripple has to get rid of the other extra 20% of the supply, right? They have to get rid of 20 billion. In order for them to kind of have the International Monetary Fund take that asset and utilize it as a reserve bridge asset or a liquidity for the global RTGS, that's another thing I'm going to dive a little bit into tonight, the global RTGS. I believe that XRP is the global RTGS. If that is the case, then a government has to utilize the asset in order for it to be included by the International Monetary Fund. So this is kind of the connections that will break. When I talk about the global RTGS, I think that if the IMF ends up taking that and implementing that into its special drawing rights, then it does in and of itself become the global RTGS, which means that it is essentially a global reserve asset, okay? But this is essentially what it is, right? We're talking about the 20% of the token supply. They have to get rid of the 20% token supply, right? And this is 100% speculative. This is not confirmed. We're kind of just looking at the cards that we have, and we're trying to critically think through this and say, if this is true, if that 20% threshold does get passed, what could Ripple do? What is in the best interest of Ripple for them to do with that extra 20 billion tokens or that extra 20% of the supply? What is in their best interest? Yeah, you may say, okay, they can probably sell it to the market, right? They can put money in their pockets. But what better way to implement real demand of the asset by implementing it into the core infrastructure of the global banking? That's the type of demand that you can't receive on a centralized exchange or a decentralized exchange. That retail demand, the buying and the selling, it's peanuts compared to infrastructure plays where if it was utilized for the global RTGS or it was being utilized every time they had to tap into liquidity, if it does become that global reserve asset, that type of demand, that institutional infrastructure demand, that's like a clock that never turns off. It's ticking every single second. That is demand that is constantly being hit on the reserves. All right? So, just so we are clear, this is 100% speculative, okay? You know what? Just for giggles, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read the IMF setting the price. This is not something that I would be interested in my own research because at the end of the day, who knows? But I am kind of curious to see why are people saying this. Well, the SDR is a real IMF reserve asset, okay? It's not a currency itself, but it is used for international reserves and settlements, okay? There is no official ESDR, electronic ESDR, that includes cryptos like XRP. The IMF has researched digital assets, blockchains, and payments, and even mentioned Ripple and XRP in older papers for cross-border efficiency, but no adoption or inclusion in particularly for the special drawing rights, okay? The IMF rules require assets in the SDR basket to be issued by major economies, right? So this would essentially have to be like a government utilizing this technology, all right? Theories claim that if the U.S. adopts XRP via government holdings or mandates, maybe that ties into the, what if Ripple sold pennies on the dollar, donated, I don't know, but what if that global, the Donald Trump's global reserve basket for cryptos, he said XRP was mentioned. What if this is Ripple not playing checkers, but they're playing chess? We're going to give the United States a reserve, an entire reserve of our currency. If that's the case, we know the International Monetary Fund would probably implement that into the SDR basket. Maybe that's the game plan that they're playing all along. I don't know. This is all speculative, right? But if Ripple does have the United States obtain a reserve of XRP, then inevitably the IMF is going to include that into the SDR baskets, which would put XRP as a global digital liquidity tool. Right? That's kind of making sense. But this is highly speculative, conspiratorial. There's no statement supporting XRP becoming the SDR component or any SDR. But what we do know is when you do the comparison of the special drawing rights of what they tried to solve and what XRP Ripple is solving, they're checking boxes for boxes, right? You're talking about a bridge asset. We have an entire bundle of fiat currencies that are included from the International Monetary Fund. If you have any sort of understanding of what XRP does, it's a bridge asset. It is bridging not just fiat dollars, but value in and of itself to all different types. US dollar to euro, euro to the yen to the pound. They're essentially acting as the bridge, jumping between the two assets. But they're not only doing that for fiat currencies. They're doing that for stablecoins. They're doing that for tokenized deposits. They're doing that for central bank digital currencies, and vice versa. You could take a fiat dollar like the US dollar and bridge that utilizing XRP into a central bank digital currency and go backwards. So it's not just dollar to dollar or CBDC to CBDC, but it's bridging multiple values in and of itself, right? But when you are comparing what XRP's tech does compared to what the International Monetary Fund was looking for, what the special drawing rights could do, you're almost checking box to box. Maybe, just maybe, in order for the International Monetary Fund to succeed in implementing this special drawing rights, they need a government to adopt or to hold on to the reserve for it. Maybe, just maybe. They didn't really give me why the International Monetary Fund would set the price on it. Right? IMF setting the price. Grok did not give me why the International Monetary Fund would have to declare the price of it. I'm going to ask it. I'm kind of curious. Right? Okay, so in order for the IMF to include it into the SDR basket as a reserve tool, it has to be adopted by governments first, right? Meaning that they will use it as a reserve, settlement, or official asset. We already know that XRP is probably going to be implemented into the crypto reserve here in the United States. It seems as if there's a good chance for them to kind of gain traction here in the United States as a means of settlement. Who knows? So if the U.S. Adopts XRP, or other nations, this isn't even just the United States, by governments, then holding a big chunk of it, then the IMF could follow the SDR, right? Once adopted, the ESDR is a hypothetical digital reserve global asset. The IMF would then declare or set the XRP's value price in a stable, official way, similar to how it calculates the SDR values daily. But why? Why do they have a need to set the price? That's what I'm not understanding. How do they actually set the valuation of it? The IMF does not set or declare the price of cryptocurrencies, individual assets, or anything outside the SDR. Okay, well, yeah, that makes sense, right? But the SDR is valued on a calculated daily, okay, by the International Monetary Fund. And it's based on a fixed basket of whatever is included in the SDR basket. The IMF uses market exchange rates, so real-world spot rates from sources like the Bank of England, to sum up the dollar equivalents of the fixed amounts of each currency basket. For example, if one SDR, specific fixed amounts like 50 cents of the US dollar, add that to the equivalent of the euro, and etc., then the daily value in US dollars are those amounts times the current exchange rates. I don't know if I'm very good at math. I read that. I didn't understand a word, absolute thing, what that's telling me. I wish I was smarter. I don't know. The basket is reviewed every 5 years. It's reviewed every 5 years. So would that mean that it would have a stable price for 5 years, depending on when they would do it? The IMF has no power or arbitrarily declared to the price of Bitcoin, XRP, gold. It only computes the SDR's value as an accounting unit for its own operations. So it's basically telling me that it wouldn't set a price for the token. It's essentially what it's saying. Why the theory doesn't align with the facts. Yes, we know that this is highly speculative, right? The nations must adopt it first. That hasn't happened yet. It seems like you can kind of look at the recent breadcrumbs and say, you know what? Nations probably will adopt some of these assets, but they haven't done it yet. So that, again, is speculation. Claims that the IMF is predetermining XRP's price or the ESDR is unconfirmation. No Ripple U.S. government stated that the transfers of XRP are the IMF. Speculation again. The IMF wouldn't declare XRP's price because that's not what it does, even for the actual SDR. It just reports a calculated value from the market. The IMF sets the XRP price. Claim is from bullish theories, not grounded in the IMF or global financial operations. This is why, and guys, I mean, when I was looking into this, I really wasn't interested in why, like the price thing of it, because that's kind of like maybe a stretching a little bit. But there is some truth in it. And to be honest with you, I got this from a tweet. Okay? I got this from a tweet. And 80% of it is accurate. Yes, once the Clarity Act is approved, Ripple must hold 20% of the supply to avoid being a security. 100% true, based on its current writings of it. By seceding part of it to the U.S., that's kind of him predicting it. It allows the IMF to set the XRP price since the IMF can only adopt crypto assets. Well, this is the part that is incorrect. That's the part that's incorrect. But by seceding part of it to the government, it complies and the IMF can only adopt assets that are adopted by nations. That is true. This is the part that is untrue. And you know what? Probably a really crappy content creator. You know, just like everybody else, they're trying to, hype the price of an asset. The tweet is 100% speculation because it hasn't happened yet. You can even go as far as saying that this is delusion, right? You see something coming, it hasn't happened yet, but you're looking at the breadcrumbs and you're saying there's a good chance for this to happen, right? That belief in something, you could say that it's delusion. But that's the part that I disagree with. Is based off of what I read on here. Is the IMF is setting the price. From what I understand, absolutely not. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk about the global RTGS, right? Because if we are talking about the special drawing rights, the hell is this? I clicked on this link before. If we are talking about the special drawing rights, then the global RTGS is essentially the same thing, right? They're talking here cross-border payments. This is liquidity without limitations, right? A new borderless value exchange. I'm going to have to find who... I'm going to have to find a different article. The FSB. Let's take a look at what the FSB is saying. And I think I highlighted this. Where was I doing this live? Was this something that I had done live? Because I dove into this article before, and I don't know if I even remember it. Let me see. What is anything highlighted in here? No, nothing is highlighted. I do remember these questions actually. Let's take a look at this. The building blocks are laid out well in the wholesale markets, which indirectly underpin the other two segments through liquidity management, wholesale payments, FX, pooling payments, or directly via interbank payments aligned with custom orders. The transfer of cross-border liquidity between parties via wholesale payments I don't know what I'm looking for in here, to be honest with you. Should I dare to do it? Should I dare to say XRP? All right. We can read it together if you guys don't mind. Ripple Labs is a fintech company founded in 2012 with the goal to build the internet of value, right? So Ripple wants to do for the internet, do for money what the internet did to information. They want to move money instantly, cheaply, and at the center of Ripple's technology is XRP, digital asset to facilitate cross-border payments, right? XRP operates on a decentralized open source blockchain called the XRP Ledger. The SWIFT network, the existing backbone of international payments, which is a messaging protocol, they don't actually deal with settlement, connects over 11,500 banks worldwide and handles $5 trillion every single day. It's probably more than that by now. SWIFT doesn't actually move the money. Instead, it sends the payment instructions. The actual funds are shuffled between the banks using Nostro-Vostro accounts, which tie up $27 trillion of parked, stagnant liquidity. How many countries are actually utilizing XRP currently? That's a good question. I don't know. Let me ask. $40 to 70 countries. How many countries are there? 300 something? I don't even know. How many countries are there? 300 something? So 40 to 70. I wonder, I feel like this number of 300 banks was something that they had talked about in the early 2020s. It's probably different than that. I think that there's still a lot of non-disclosure agreements that have to be released, but I feel like that number is much larger than 300 because I think that is a number that Brad Garlinghouse had came out with, I want to say like maybe 4 years ago. And then this is important to talk about, right? Not all 300 countries use the XRP token directly. Many of them use Ripple's technology for messaging and for the settlement. Hopefully that was good. Good enough answer for you. But yeah, they're essentially saying that Swift is the one that's actually sending the messages, okay? Ripple's vision is to replace or complement this system using XRP as a bridge asset instead of the banks holding foreign currencies in multiple countries, kind of like what the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights was trying to do. They can hold XRP to facilitate real currency conversion and settlement. This reduces the need for pre-funding accounts. When it's known as the liquidity layer, which is exactly what the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights was trying to implement, was global liquidity, the global RTGS. Users would be able to move different platforms. It has a greater potential to generate a liquidity multiplier effect. A liquidity multiplier effect, similar to how fractional reserve banking amplifies deposits. So with fractional reserve banking, for every $1 you put into the, he says an hour, for every $1 you put into your bank account, the bank basically turns that dollar into 10. That's what fractional reserve banking is. But they're saying that it has the potential to do the same thing, and they're calling this a liquidity multiplier effect. That is how something like the global RTGS actually can become implemented. By being a recycled rapidly in international transactions, relatively small amount of XRP could support a much larger volume of global payment flows. Do you know how they do that? An expensive token. That's exactly how they do that. A relatively small amount of XRP could support a much larger volume of global payment flows. The only way they could do that is if they need less XRP in order to facilitate the same amount of liquidity or payments or settlements that they were trying to do a year ago. The only way they could do that is if the price went up and less XRP was needed in order to facilitate that transaction. It's the only way that they can do that. That's why David Schwartz says that the asset actually becomes more efficient with a higher price. That's exactly what David Schwartz is talking about. So we don't need to go into the AML, the tracking of everything. So again, there's over 300 financial institutions. This was, okay, I was wrong. I said that 2020, they're actually saying in 2019, the 300 global financial institutions was confirmed by Ripple. PNC, American Express, Santander, that was 2018, are already adopting exploring XRP technology. It has also participated in white papers and task force led by institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of International Settlements, exploring the role of interoperable digital money. Okay, so we have the banking cartel here, the International Monetary Fund and the BIS. They are above the Federal Reserve. This is the banking cartel that we are talking about, are exploring digital assets that could inevitably become a global liquidity provider, ease the fragmentation of value pertaining to jurisdictions. So they are already exploring technologies out there. If Ripple and XRP were to be formally integrated into these systems, it would have to represent a paradigm shift, once in a lifetime opportunity. Is it possible that XRP is misunderstood? Are people treating this asset as if it's a tradable asset? They're looking for the 20, 30, 40% ROI and then jumping out? Is it possible people are misunderstanding this? Instead of central banks settling transactions over multi-day networks, they could use blockchain rails. We get that, right? But Ripple wants to be more than just a payments company, but a backbone for the digital monetary infrastructure. Keyword, infrastructure. These advances do not come without obstacles. Ripple has applied for a national bank charter with the US OCC. I am so glad that they brought this up into this article. Isn't Swift working on their own ledger to move messaging? They are. I believe that this article actually even mentioned it. Swift GPI was one of them. Okay. Their own ledger. Okay, schmacked. We'll get into that as well. This is something different. The Swift GPI is different. The Swift GPI was launched in 2017 and now settles in minutes to a few hours, depending on the specific route. The banks are involved. Okay, so 2017, right? The new protocol made an international payment significantly faster, more transparent, traceable to 2025. So schmacked. We're actually going to dive into that, right? Swift. I think it was consensus. Blockchain. All right. So this came out in September 29th of last year, of 2025. September 29th, right? Swift to add blockchain-based ledger to its infrastructure stack in a groundbreaking move to accelerate the scale and benefits of digital finance in more than 200 countries. So let's dive into what this article is actually talking about. Swift and a group of more than 30 financial institutions globally are developing a shared digital ledger with the focus of 24/7 cross-border payments. That is great. So Swift, trusted by 11,500 banks, $5 to $7 trillion every single day, Swift is kind of have their hands dirty with, right? Swift is going to work with Consensus on a prototype of a ledger, which will leverage Swift's unmatched resiliency, scalability, security. Swift is trusted, right? Separately, building on earlier pilots, Swift will also add the capability to support interoperability across existing and emerging systems for various use cases. That right there, when they're talking about interoperability between traditional finance as well as your DeFi, that's where we need that interoperability to actually start enabling. Because you can't have settlement if the infrastructure is not actually enabled, right? How do you have the on-ramps from traditional finance to the blockchain back to traditional finance if they don't natively connect with one another? So Swift has to support interoperability across the existing traditional financial system and I read that and I hear DeFi and TradFi. That's what I'm reading, okay? So let's actually get into it because they had named Consensus, which is, I believe it's I want to say it's a layer 2 of Ethereum, but we need to actually understand what exactly is going on in this shared digital ledger, okay? So 30 financial institutions, they might have actually came out and said who they were actually working with. They might have came out and said it, right? This is the key part to pay attention to, all right? SWIFT's focus is on the infrastructure. Their focus isn't on the settlement. SWIFT is not telling you we have a ledger, we have a blockchain, and that blockchain is going to settle, and it's only going to prioritize the native asset to that blockchain. What they're telling you is SWIFT is focused on the infrastructure. Remember, SWIFT does not settle anything. They are essentially just the messaging platform for it. The types of tokens that will be exchanged on the ledger is the territory of the commercial and the central banks. That's it. That is it. The types of tokens. The types of tokens that will be sent, settled, traded, exchanged on that ledger for those 24/7 cross-border payments is the responsibility, the priority. It's up to the discretion of the commercial and the central banks. If the central banks want to choose one particular blockchain because it is a shared ledger, because it is a digital shared ledger, it's not a one chain to rule them all. If it is a multi-chain future and they're telling you the types of tokens that will be exchanged is up to the discretion of the commercial and the central banks, we don't know what that settlement asset will be. We don't know. So yes, SWIFT is coming in and they're working with Consensus to create a prototype of a shared digital ledger. But we don't actually know what the settlement tokens will be. That is up to the discretion of the central banks and the commercial banks. Now, I can't sit here and tell you that it's XRP. I have no idea. I can't tell you that it's XLM. I have no idea. I don't know what it is. But we can't rule out the fact that there is a hypothetical, a good probability that it could be XRP. Could be is what I'm saying. It could be Solana, right? The only way we could take this information from what SWIFT is telling us and narrow out the possibilities of what it couldn't be is we would have to sit here and read this and say, well, what blockchains do the commercial and the central banks not want to use? Which ones can't handle that type of settlement? Which ones have no partnerships with banks? Which ones have no infrastructure on and off ramp or workflows with the central banks? Look at your blockchain. Is it working with central banks? Is it working with commercial banks? If it is, there is a good chance it could be utilized by the central banks. But if you know your blockchain has no commercial bank integrations, it's not even going to be here. It won't even be implemented here. That is how we are critically thinking the general information that SWIFT wants to give us. SWIFT might be ZBCN's new client announcement at XRP Las Vegas. I'll keep an eye on it. Could the shared digital ledger run on the XRP ledger? I don't know. I don't know. I think that's a great question. I'm a little thrown off, honestly. I think the reason that it was selected with the layer 2 of Ethereum is because of the interoperability and the smart contract that Ethereum does have. The XRP ledger kind of lacks in the smart contracts. I know they're introducing amendments they are ERC compatible, and I understand that, but I think that's essentially what it is, because the shared ledger has to have the interoperability with multiple blockchains, and it has to have the interoperability with traditional finance. So, I mean, in terms of I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, could the XRP ledger, is it capable of running that? I don't know. Look, the XRP ledger is great for a lot of things, but there's also limitations with that as well. I don't know. I don't think that it's more of like, okay, this is the foundation. The XRP ledger is the foundation for the shared ledger. I just think that it's going to have a specific particular use case for when it is needed. When they do want to settle and they need that liquidity, maybe XRP is their best option. when they do need to send smart contracts, they have to implement smart contracts. Maybe Ethereum is their best option. I don't know. I don't know what their best options will be, right? But that's where kind of understanding the limitations and what the digital asset superpower is and where they kind of struggle is. I don't think that it's going to be the foundation for it. I just think that maybe they'll tap into it when it has to be utilized. Swift's website has shown for years that they will build on layer 2 Ethereum. Yeah. I think XDC is great. XDC is great. What they lack, they're great with trade finance. What they lack with is liquidity. That's really XDC's hard point. So Swift, right, with consensus. Their vision for the ledger is a secure real-time log of transactions between financial institutions. A record, right? That's what blockchains do. They record. They're very good at not allowing that information that's jotted down in that ledger or that blockchain to be manipulated, right? That is what they're great at. And you know what? I remember, I think I made a video about this because I went through here and like I highlighted. I could probably see what I could do right now. The Royal Bank of Canada, I'm pretty sure works with Ripple. Oh boy, it's smoke. What is he saying here? Royal Bank of Canada recently joined Ripple to create a possible alternative to Swift. Canada's faster payment system, Linux, goes live March 10th. Is that what it is? Linux? So if I go back, Royal Bank of Canada and Linux and Ripple, would I find something there? Okay, the Royal Bank of Canada has engaged in a blockchain trials with Ripple to modernize cross-border payments, actively participates in Linux. I want to say that the Royal Bank of Canada has also participated in the Hyperledger. I want to say it's the Hyperledger Foundation. Hyperledger Fabric. Okay. I really don't want to read through this. But we see here, right? Built on the Hyperledger Fabric. Okay. Okay, right. We see here, right? The Canadian government and TD Bank successfully piloted a $100 million bond issuance using Hyperledger Fabric. Again, we'll say XRP and Hyperliquid. Hyperledger Fabric, we could see that they are included, right? XLM is also included in this. Okay. Now, Banco Santander is we obviously know worked with Ripple. Bank of America worked with Ripple. I want to say BBVA. I'm not positive on that one. BNP Paribas, absolutely. We know BNY. I believe Citibank as well. Let me double check that one. Okay. Medico. Right? So they're one way or another working with Ripple. That's through Ripple's custody. I want to say NatWest as well. Deutsche Bank, absolutely. I want to say DBS. First Abu Dhabi Bank, maybe. HSBC, absolutely. JP Morgan Chase, I want to say that they're doing it through Ondo. I want to say that they are indirectly working with one another. Or maybe that was BlackRock. I think it was actually BlackRock. Let me see. Maybe I'm wrong. Indirect partnership? They are connected one way or another. Was it RLUSD? Cassie, it's CBI. Caveman, is Ripple and JP Morgan indirectly working with one another? I thought they were. G Treasury. G Treasury. Or is it Ripple Prime? I'm spending a lot of time on this one. I'm usually jumping through these. Okay, here we go. G Treasury has partnered with JP Morgan. All right, so indirect partnership with Ripple. G Treasury is a Ripple partnership. I also want to say Ripple Prime, which is right. Is it Ripple Prime? Who knows? I want to say NatWest as well, right? For my Canadian friend in there, we connected that. Standard Chartered, of course. TD Bank. I don't know. Wells Fargo, I want to say yes. Okay, RippleNet. While over 200 financial banks and institutions, TD Bank is... Oh, it's not highlighted in reports regarding a direct partnership with Ripple. Sorry. I thought it said it was. Swift testing a blockchain. Nope, I don't care about that. I thought they were working on something. TD Bank. Let me see. R3. I'm almost like scared to like click on that link from Binance. Maybe not. I could be wrong about TD Bank. What was the other one? It was Wells Fargo. I want to say yes. Ripple and Wells Fargo. Maybe not. I feel like that's not a good source. I don't know. I don't want to spend. I could be wrong about that as well. I had a feeling that they were. JP Morgan filed for a spot ETS for Bitcoin though. Yeah, I don't know if they did. I'm not particularly kind of doing this the research tonight narrow for like ETFs or ETPs. I'm more kind of trying to connect the breadcrumbs for utility and infrastructure. The ETFs are great. Yes, institutions are utilizing that blockchain in a particular manner, but they're treating it as an investment vehicle. I'm not interested in finding out what the banks want to buy to try to make a profit on. I'm trying to figure out what the banks, the institutions, the governments, the central banks want to work with as infrastructure and utilize that technology because they're going to depend on it. I don't really want like what. Yes, I think ETFs and ETPs are important. I'm not saying that they're not. But for me, what gets me very, very much excited is the infrastructure plays, not the investment vehicles. Yeah, I think it's great. Look, if BlackRock came out with an ETF for XRP, I think that would be great. Yes, it would pump liquidity into there. It would pull the circulating supply out. It would do good. But that is still nothing compared to the central banks testing Ripple's technology for CBDCs. Because if they do select Ripple's technology for CBDCs and XRP is the bridging the value between, that's infrastructure. That's the type of demand that never turns off. That, as an investor or a researcher, that is what I'm interested in. I don't care about the ETFs. I don't care about the ETPs. I think it's great for the short-term price action. but they could sell it when they want, right? Depending on the clients. But with the infrastructure, they're locked in. They need that asset. Wells Fargo was testing RippleNet. Caveman, thank you so much for fact checking me, double checking. Is Canton an ISO token in your opinion? I don't know. I would say I would say it absolutely is compatible with ISO 222 messages. I'm not sure if it's ISO TC 307 compliant. I'm going to say that it is ISO 222 compliant. Yeah. I wouldn't imagine that they're working with the DTCC if they weren't. If they couldn't communicate in the new text message, I wouldn't imagine that they would. I don't know if it's TC 307. For you guys that don't know what ISO TC 307 is, it's essentially the standardization for DLT technology and blockchain. Yes, ISO 222 is for the financial messaging, but there's also a standard for DLT and blockchain. Right? ISO TC 307. It is the standards for blockchain and DLT technology. It works on developing international standards for blockchain interoperability, privacy, and security. The Canton Network is an interoperable privacy blockchain for institutional assets. I don't know. I don't know if it... I don't know. Is it TC 307 compatible? Let me ask the AI. I honestly don't know. Yes, it aligns with the ISO TC 307 frameworks because they are complying with what the ISO TC 307 is kind of standing out for: interoperability, privacy, security, and governance. So, yeah, I mean, of course, the messaging in 222, it seems as if they are compliant with the standards for interoperability, the standards for privacy, the standards for security, the standards for governance. That was a good question. Thank you for that. It said the ISO coin is. It said the coin is. Thank you. Yeah, it was a good question, dude. I don't even know what. So yeah, I think Schmacked had brought me into what Swift was doing with this one, right? But I essentially was kind of going back to it potentially being a global RTGS, right? For the liquidity layer. Again, it says it here. Could it essentially be the global RTGS? There is a I hate the price stuff, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little curious. Hypothetical price scenario for XRP. The volume of the daily Swift cross-border payments is 5 trillion a day. The velocity is how many times a single XRP is reused in one day. The current supply of the token is 55 billion. That's the circulating supply. Although it's capped at 100, so let's assume that the XRP ledger fully replaces Swift's technology and XRP is reused 10 times a day. I don't know if 10 times is conservative or exaggerated. I don't know. A practical but not aggressive assumption. Okay. Once you divide the liquidity pool of 5 trillion by a velocity of 10, you get a liquidity pool of 500 billion. To arrive at the price of XRP, you would need to divide 500 billion by the circulating supply of 55 billion to arrive at $9 per XRP. Should the XRP be used 5 times, then it would be 1818. So that sounds like it's a market cap multiplier, right? If it was used, what did it say, 10 times? Was it 10 times it gave us a $9 price? If it was used 5 times a day, it would be doubled the price at 18.18. That's the multiplier. Right? They're saying 10 times. That brings us to a price at $9. Should it be used 5 times? How is that possible? It's going backwards. Shouldn't it be like 20 times a day would bring us to 18.18? I never really looked into the multiplier. I don't really know. So that is just the cross-border. Okay, then they're talking about a global settlement layer for international banks. This is tokenized assets, CBDCs. $27 trillion in Nostro Vostro, $5 trillion in daily forex derivatives, $5 trillion tokenized asset layer, $10 trillion in transactions with the velocity of 20, which is another $9. So is that compounded? Is that 9 on top of 9 on top of 9? Who knows what the velocity is? Who also? I mean, they're tokenizing assets. You know, who knows? Who knows? What was I going with this? Oh, there was a picture. There was a picture I was looking for. There he is. Look at this guy. That's my buddy. That's my buddy. Apex Crypto Consulting. Guys, please give him a follow. He's absolutely awesome. How many states are adopting XRP into their own state pension funds? I don't think any. I could be wrong on that. I don't think any. Oh, Indiana. Arizona has proposed legislation for naming XRP as its state reserve. What? 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 As its state reserve? Oh, it's the strategic digital reserve asset. Okay. There is a particular image I am looking for. Maybe if I jump over to X and I look it up. Ooh. Maybe I can find that picture. Maybe not. I guess not. What a ripple. Texas is looking into it as well. Who is he? That's I got a cramp. Ow! Ow! It's this guy. He sat down with Paul Barron. I had an interview with him. Absolute monster of a researcher. You guys should follow him on YouTube. That's him and Paul Barron. And I think that's me.
To us, CLS.
Yeah, I did have a sit down with him. You can find that on my YouTube channel. Awesome researcher. This guy is very smart. I would absolutely recommend you guys to check out his YouTube channel. Him and Maximus Crypto as well. I don't think I'm going to find that picture of what I'm looking for. Here it is. That's it. I don't even think I could zoom in for you guys. All right, I'm going to change my... We got to zoom in on this. Okay. So this is essentially how the real-time gross settlements is essentially set out. Teaspoon of mustard. I can't do that. That's worse than a pickle shot. So the real-time gross settlements is set up. It's jurisdictional, right? The real-time gross settlements. This is where you have your Fedwire in the United States. You have your CHAPS payments over in the UK. I don't even know what China's is. I can't pronounce it. Right? You have the Bank of Japan over in Japan. And they're essentially, right, the United States, we use ACH. Over in the EU, they use SEPA. And this is essentially the, right here. If you guys can, you can't see my mouse, but the BOJ, Target 2, Fedwire, CHAPS, and for China, right? That's essentially the real-time gross settlements. What they're saying with the global RTGS is they want to combine the liquidity. Right now, these are all fragmented. So they essentially want to take that and the XRP ledger via the interledger protocol, as you guys can see, the ILP, could potentially be a solution for a global RTGS because they're connecting it, right? That is through the interoperability that the XRP ledger kind of enables. Now, all of those would be connected via the XRP ledger, right? We can follow this chart. You have Ripple with all of their banks and all of their partnerships, the interledger protocol. Now it comes over to the platforms. And we know that Ripple is involved in Hyperledger Fabric, which is absolutely huge. R3 Corda, sure. Digital Asset Holdings, Ethereum. Those we know. The DTCC, absolutely. I'm not sure about the rest of those in capital markets. And I don't even, honestly, Amazon as well. I believe that they are working with Amazon. And I'm not sure about the rest. Honestly, the rest, I don't know. But this is how it seems to be dividing things up, right? We have our blockchains and DLT, your Hyperledger, your Corda, sure. Your capital markets, you have your traditional finance in there. I think this illustration is implementing that Ripple is somehow connected to these institutions. Maybe. I can't confirm that. I don't know. You have your trade finance. That's Oracle and IBM is in trade finance. Okay. Internet of Things. Kind of weird they have Tesla involved in that. But this is how they have things kind of broken up. But that's essentially, right, they're combining the liquidity here. And in order for the Ripple to kind of implement or fill into that role of a global RTGS, things have to be connected, right? That you can't have that settlement without that interoperability. What up, Prison of Blockchain, guys? Give that brother a follow. So potentially, could they be the global RTGS? Maybe. I don't know. Who really knows? But that's essentially where they're going with this. When they talk about Ripple becoming a global RTGS. I don't know if there was something else I was thinking I wanted to look into. There was just some news that came out with Ripple and Hidden Road. Right? Was it Hidden Road in the DTC? I think it was Hidden Road in the DTCC. Via the DTC, I believe, which is a subsidiary of the DTCC. Okay, let me fix this for you guys. This was March 2nd, so 4 days ago, right? Was added to the DTCC's NCCC participant. This enables Ripple to directly access U.S. clearing settlement infrastructure. I mean, at what point do you just see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil? It's a poopy coin. At what point do you sit there and look at this infrastructure, the web, the spider web that they are creating, and who not are they connected to, and sit there and go, $3 is all this thing's going to? I don't know. The NCCC is a subsidiary of the DTCC that provides centralized clearing, settlement, risk management. I mean, come on, clearing and settlement. Now, I would be interested to see. I'm going to throw it into the AI because I honestly don't know. I want to see what the digital asset would actually be doing in this ecosystem, right? Because that's what I'm interested for. When they talk about clearing and settlement, could XRP potentially be the role for that? Would it be the liquidity? Would it be the interledger protocol for the messaging? I don't necessarily know. Look at the research this thing's doing. I don't necessarily know what they would be doing in here, right? I mean, the hidden road. Okay, let's see. The OTC trades. It now operates inside the U.S. Post-trade clearing settlement infrastructure that's used by major Wall Street. $3 trillion every single year. All right. The NC still handles the actual clearing settlement. Ripple Prime just executes the trades that feed into it. What does that mean? So it could still be a liquidity bridge, faster, cheaper. Well, if they're not utilizing the XRPL, then that doesn't matter. Because if they're utilizing the prime broker, that doesn't necessarily equate. Maybe it is. Right? So it's executing and clears on the NCC side. Collateral finance or the final legs settle on the XRPL. But that would have to be actually it being implemented in there. The prime brokerage involves heavy collateral management. XRP and RLUSD can serve as efficient collateral or liquidity in these deals, especially for international clients. The DTCC has filed patents in 2025 naming XRPL and XRP as compatible with tokenized finance frameworks. I actually want to see if I can find that. Genfinity. This is, what's his name? What's his name owns this? What's that influencer? What is his name? I don't know. Look up the Kraken news next. Okay. Is a lot of the reserve going to be the government and the price will go crazy? We were kind of covering that a little bit earlier of how XRP could potentially fill into the role of a global reserve asset and become the global RTGS and the liquidity player. Wow, Ray, what up? Thank you so much for that. That's what we were covering earlier, was the connection of Ripple getting rid of their requirements for the 20% supply based on the Clarity Act. The way the Clarity Act is written, and one entity can't hold more than 20% of the supply. So if Ripple's holding 40%, what do they do with the other 20%? Maybe they give it to the U.S. government as a means of a reserve asset, and then the International Monetary Fund could hold on to that asset. They could potentially implement that in as a special drawing rights. That asset could implement liquidity and settlement for a global basket of fiat currencies out there. That was essentially what we were covering. Joey V. Yo, what up, dude? I haven't seen you in a minute, man. Good to see you here. Does Ripple need to have unconditional trust for the OCCC to get the Fed from? Does Ripple have to have unconditional trust? I think that if they do get approved, I think when they do obtain the Fed Master account, That right there is the confirmation for the institutions. When they do enable that Fed master account, that's essentially having the Fed is going to be able to hold on to those assets, right? They will actually be implemented into the central workflows. So I think that is the trust layer in and of itself. If they do actually get obtained, and it does, I don't think that they did get obtained. Evernorth is, I think so essentially Evernorth is, if you know Michael Saylor and what the hell is his company? Caveman, what the hell is Michael Saylor's company? Digital, come on. What the hell is that guy's company? MicroStrategies. Thank you, guys. That's essentially what Evernorth is going to be for XRP, right? But they are not just going to be treating it as an investment vehicle the same way that MicroStrategy is treating Bitcoin. They're treating it as an investment vehicle. Evernorth is actually going to be implementing the technology, utilizing the XRPL, and they will be they'll be dumping a ton of liquidity into it. So you can almost compare it to MicroStrategy, but they'll actually be implementing the technology rather than just treating it as an investment vehicle. So somebody had asked me about the Kraken news. I do want to try to remember that, but I want to jump into what the DTCC was doing here. Okay, so this was a patent, right? And you can see at the bottom it says Hidden Road, right? Partners. And this is for over-the-counter trades, okay? So this was bringing bonds on chain. What was it? The DTCC, 3.7 quadrillion in securities, over 100 million transactions daily, holds 87 trillion dollars of assets. XDC. So the DTCC filed 2 patents in 2025 explaining Ripple and the XRP ledger is compatible infrastructure for tokenized frameworks. The digital liquidity tokens. Yes, I remember we were doing a deep dive on that one. We know Ripple and DTCC are working with each other, right? Okay, so he's just talking about the NSCC again. All right, so we're going to go to Kraken. Kraken being the first centralized exchange to obtain a national trust charter, I believe it was. Was it from the OCC? All right. So Kraken gains access to the Federal Reserve's payment system as Ripple awaits approval. The Kraken Fed Master account approval marks a milestone for the industry. This is just another confirmation that our DeFi is being implemented into TradFi. They tried to fight it, right? First they fight it, then they sue it, then they resist it, and they join it. This is essentially where we are. Big, absolutely big. So with the Kraken Fed Master account approval, the crypto exchange banking arm will have access to the Fed's core payment system and will be able to move money on the same rails that the banks and the credit unions already use. It's huge. That's your confirmation. If there was no other conviction of what you guys had, that we are shifting out of speculation into a utility-driven market, and that crypto is no longer being treated as an investment vehicle, your ETFs, your ETPs, but they're actually treating crypto as transactional rails. This is your confirmation right here. Don't you think you want to figure out what transactional rails? You know what? I've been doing lives for a little over a year, and my lives usually are, I pretty much have the same message I get across to people. People are focusing on the wrong things. They're focusing on speculative assets. But what's really the real wealth, what's really happening is in the utility, okay? The infrastructure plays. That's actually the Trojan horse of this industry. Everyone's focusing on the speculative assets, but the utility, the blockchains that solve a real world problem, those are the ones that are going to be the biggest. That's your Amazons, that's your Teslas, that's your Googles. You want to find those? You got to figure out what the infrastructure plays are. For a whole year, that has been my mindset. And I have always tried to show people the illusion versus what's actually going on behind the curtains. Okay? But I feel like I also now need to start talking to people, because if they couldn't understand the simplistic idea that we are shifting out of a speculative market into a utility-driven market, then they are going to have a very difficult time understanding why the institutions are not holding crypto as an investment vehicle, trying to make money on it, buying it here, selling it here, not treating crypto as an investment vehicle, but treating crypto as a transactional rail, as infrastructure, as utility. If I can't get people to understand we are shifting from speculation into utility, then I am definitely not getting them to understand that the institutional adoption, it's not just ETFs, it's not just ETPs, it's not just the global reserve, the United States reserve, crypto reserve. It's not just that. It's not just institutions buying and holding on to it and hoping that they make a good ROI. That's not what the crypto is actually doing here. They're not just treating it as an investment vehicle. They are treating it as infrastructure, as transactional rails. And if you can do your own research and just find your own conviction and figure out which projects have the best probability of becoming transactional rails, maybe you make a ton of money. I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to say this right now. I never tell you guys what to buy. The best investments that you can make will be the ones that become infrastructure. They are utilized every single day from enterprises, corporations, governments, central banks. The ones that have the FU money, right? The trillions of dollars. Not your little DeFi liquidity pools, or the ETFs, or they're going after pension. None of that crap, right? That's peas in a bucket, right? We're talking about big boy money here. Your enterprises, your conglomerates, your corporations, your governments, your central banks, the big boy money. If you could figure out which blockchains are they going to utilize as infrastructure, even better, transactional rails, that's the kind of demand that doesn't have a speculative 4-year cycle. It doesn't. Why? Because it's no different than the DTCC processing quadrillions of dollars every single year, trillions of dollars every single day. That volume doesn't go away. Why? Because it's infrastructure. They actually have a utilization aspect to it. No different than oil. Regardless of whatever the price of oil is, you still need it. For everything. For everything. You need oil for everything. Regardless of whatever the price of oil is, it's utilized as infrastructure. That will never go away. And you are also seeing infrastructure in our space. And we only have a short window. I don't know if it's going to be 6 months, 12 months. It could be 5 years. It could be 2030. I don't know when. All I can do is watch each domino dropping one after the next. And I'm saying, I'm recognizing the pattern recognition here. Crypto is shifting out of speculation into utility. The real institutional money is not coming as investment vehicles. It's coming as infrastructure plays. And they are only choosing specific projects. That's it. They are choosing specific projects. I don't even know how many cryptos there are. I don't know how many cryptos there are. There's going to be a lot of cryptos that get crushed when regulations come. We'll see what happens with USDT. Right? So far, the regulations hasn't favored USDT. We'll see what happens with that. I mean, we'll see what happens when assets get declared securities rather than commodities. We will see what happens to those assets. There are so many things that are going to play out, and that's why I say when I look at a project, I look for the 3 things. I look for use case, utility. Does it solve a real-world problem? Oh, it's cross-border payments. How big is cross-border payments? How many trillions? Okay, well, it's solving something. If it's solving something, then who wants to use it, right? Partnerships and integrations is number 2. Are any banks, any central banks, any governments interested in utilizing this technology? If so, that only validates the investment even more, because if the banks are interested in it, maybe there's something to it, because the banks never lose. And the third thing is regulations. If it can't comply with current regulations and forthcoming regulations, then it would never, ever go anywhere near the Federal Reserve core banking system. It would never, ever go anywhere near the DTCC. It would never, ever go anywhere near JP Morgan or Bank of America or Santander. They wouldn't even touch it because it would be too risky. If you find an asset that competes all 3 of those, maybe it's a good investment. If you want to be even further of a researcher, then look at those assets and then try to figure out how the token actually obtains value, right? Because if the blockchain is moving trillions of dollars every year, but that doesn't equate to demand in the price, then what the hell is the point of tracking all of the adoption and the integrations? You know? You take a look at Canton for an example, and I think it's a great project. I'm really not crapping on it. The one thing is that it doesn't value the capture. It doesn't capture the value of transactions being moved across it. Meaning that the $9 trillion or whatever Canton says that it's, utilizing doesn't equate to price in the actual CC token. That's a problem for me as an investor. I want an asset that I could track the adoption, I could track the volume that could come into, and know the more institutional onboarding and more volume flowing through it does have a direct, and that's the key word, a direct impact on the price. I don't want to hear, oh, well, more institutions onboarding creates more nodes and more governance, and then there's more demand that way. I don't care about that. I'm in here to make money, right? I want to know if $9 trillion flows across this ecosystem, is that impacting my investment? That's what I want to know. Does that $9 trillion actually flow through this ecosystem? That's what I want to know. Brendan. Hey, buddy.
What's going on, bro?
Happy Friday.
Is it Friday?